arisen. Dragon's Dogma 2 is my most anticipated game of this year. For me to tell you that I'm excited would be a lie, because I'm actually exploding from the inside and crawling up my walls in anticipation, waiting for this game to release, knowing that it's just right around the corner. Now, with that said, this is a game that not only I'm excited for, but many other people, because, well, it's another open world fantasy RPG with meaningful character progression, monster hunting, and a more traditional fantasy setting that many of us have been looking for quite a while now. Now, with that said, I don't know how to really put this into words, but every single time that I see a trailer for this game, I just know it's going to be good. It has all the markings for everything it needs for success. And I realize that trailers can only be, looked at. We don't know how it plays. But with that said, I don't know. I just got a feeling. It just feels like it's going to be good. So I'm going to trust that feeling. And today what we're going to do is I'm going to take all the information that I've gathered about Dragon's Dogma 2 and put it into this video, shove it in your face, and tell you that Dragon's Dogma 2 is likely to surprise a lot of people this year. Now, before talking about Dragon's Dogma 2, I want to give you a little bit of context. Know that you won't have to have played Dragon's Dogma to play Dragon's Dogma 2. While there will be nods to the original, this is a largely self-contained story. Dragon's Dogma was a relatively unique title and initially may have escaped the notice of many players because there was a plethora of major releases around the same time of this game's debut. Released by Capcom, an open-world RPG was a foray into uncharted territories for the developer, known for franchises like Resident Evil, Monster Hunter, Street Fighter, and Devil May Cry. The design for Dragon's Dogma began in the early 2000s, with actual production not starting until 2008, bringing together a team of 150 staff members with diverse experiences in game development across all of the different studios and all the different projects that Capcom has. Hideki Itsuno, the director for Dragon's Dogma, during a conference back in 2011, said that he had been dreaming and working on the game since his days in school, which couldn't be finally realized until technology had advanced enough. Now, one of the things that I always find really endearing about the story of Dragon's Dogma is the fact that Hideki Itsuno has been working on the game and dreaming about it ever since he was a kid. And this guy has had his hands on a lot of major projects at Capcom, including just about every single Devil May Cry game and Power Stone. Capcom, why haven't you remade Power Stone? It's besides the fact. Don't get distracted. What I really like about this is it's something that this guy's been working on for so long and has so much background information and so many different systems that he's wanted to implement, but he had to wait until technology could catch up to be even able to make the game in the first place. Now, with that said, the technology that they had at the time still didn't necessarily live up to the standards or the vision of what Dragon's Dogma was supposed to be. One of the standout features of Dragon's Dogma was its innovative pawn system. This system allowed players to explore the world with AI-controlled characters that we could command and customize, creating this really unique blend of shared gameplay experiences. Additionally, the game also introduced the grab system, which allowed players to be able to interact with the game's environment and the enemies in novel ways, like climbing on top of larger enemies or grabbing onto the feet of a harpy. The game also sported an expansive open world that featured dynamic environments, a day-night cycle, and over 200 NPCs that had their own schedules, which all served to further enhance the depth and immersiveness of the game. Now, despite all of these innovations, the vision for Dragon's Dogma was never fully realized, and large swaths of content that were planned for the game were ultimately shelved due to budget and time constraints. However, in a recent interview with VGC, director Hideki Itsuno and producer Yoshiaki Hirabayashi discussed how much was left out of Dragon's Dogma and how much will find its way into Dragon's Dogma 2. And also, why it's taken so long for us to see a sequel. VGC asked, "It's been over a decade since Dragon's Dogma first released. What took so long for a sequel, and was there a driving factor to getting Dragon's Dogma 2 made?" Hirabayashi responded by saying, "Dragon's Dogma is a really valuable IP to us. We knew that we wanted to make a sequel at an early stage, but there wasn't really one particular thing that changed from no to a green light. It was just that we needed a lot of things to fall into place. First and foremost, if Itsuno-san doesn't have time to be the director of the game, it really can't get made. So having the opportunity to have him spend the time he needed on the game and being able to bring together all the other resources needed, such as a large team to work on the game of this scope, just took some years for all of that to fit together. And once it did, we got started." VGC goes on to ask, "Having played the preview build, it strikes us how much it feels like the first game. Given how the fantasy action RPG has evolved since then, were there elements of other games that you were inspired by for the sequel? Itsuno responded by saying, "We mostly just wanted to take things that we couldn't achieve in Dragon's Dogma at the time when it came out, whether it be from lack of time or pushing the limits of the hardware that was around at the time. So the main inspiration was sort of ourselves, and finally being able to achieve what we wanted to on this current console generation." But if I had to pick one other game that came out in the meantime, I would actually say Grand Theft Auto V. I kind of admire how they were able to create a world in which it really felt like NPCs were going about their daily lives independently of the player. All kinds of interesting emergent behavior could happen whenever you were exploring the city, and all kinds of weird accidents felt like it would happen whether you were there or not. That feeling of a living world is something that I've definitely tried to achieve in Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, not so long ago, I made a video called Dragon's Dogma, the greatest game that you never played, and it's mostly a account of the history of Dragon's Dogma as well as a retrospective review talking about how much I enjoy the game. But beyond that, one of the things that I come out with when I went back and played the game is that you definitely can see the areas where things were missing, where narrative was definitely missing, quests were missing, mechanics may have been missing. But more than anything, throughout the entire game, you could see what the initial and original vision was for the game that was just never realized. Now, what I really respect about Capcom and all of this is that they said that they just wouldn't make the game unless Itsuno was ready to make the game. This is his dream child. This is something that he created himself. He wants to make this game. He wants it to be the best game he possibly can make it. So as such, they just waited until he was ready to do so, until they could pull him out of any other projects and let him just focus on making Dragon's Dogma and give him the most amount of time they possibly could. So major hats off to that for him being able to realize his dream. Now, outside of that, I also think it's really cool him looking at games like Grand Theft Auto V, which we're actually going to get a little bit into later on in the video. But most of the inspiration that they have for the game that they're creating is already there. They've had the blueprints. They just didn't have the technology. Dragon's Dogma 2 is utilizing Capcom's RE engine, known for powering games like Resident Evil 7, Devil May Cry 5, Street Fighter 6, and Monster Hunter Rise, which suggests a different set of expectations this time around. The RE engine has a proven track record of delivering visually stunning and technically proficient games, making it a suitable choice for bringing the expansive and detailed world of Dragon's Dogma to life in its sequel. Itsuno commented on this in VGC's interview, saying, "Because it's an internal engine, we were able to work closely with the RE engine engineers. That means that when we were approaching a brand new genre like open world that hasn't been done on the engine before, we're able to ask the team to help us by implementing the kind of features that we need in order to achieve this game's content." So in a way, you could say that the more and more games we develop with it, since its original use in Resident Evil 7, the RE engine has actually developed alongside the company. Every game has had more and more things that we've asked the team to include, and it's become more versatile. I think at this point, it's something that we have worked with that team to make sure that it does what it needs to do. Even if the RE engine wasn't ready for open world when it started, it is now because we made it that way. I feel like over the years, all we've ever heard about is Unreal Engine 5, Unreal Engine 5, Unreal Engine 5. And while many games do look impressive using its technology, I feel like a lot of games end up relying too much on the store assets and pre-built assets that are already in the Unreal Engine. So it's really good hearing that Capcom wants to continue to use the RE engine that's really served them really well. Looking at games like Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, absolutely gorgeous. Village, stunning. Devil May Cry 5, snappy and stunning. Then you go to see the versatility of it, where you have games like Street Fighter 6 or Monster Hunter Rise, and the engine just continues to get better and better as time goes on. And all of these games look visually distinct from one another. Because it's an in-house asset, everything they make is specifically for the game that they're making. Now, this is a personal opinion. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on me, but I feel like games that are made with in-house engines, like the Resident Evil engine, or with Baldur's Gate 3 using the Divinity engine, the objects, the world, and the environment feel like they actually belong because they were purposefully made in that engine for that game. Dragon's Dogma 2 is set to be a significant advancement over its predecessor, with numerous improvements and additions aimed at creating a more immersive and dynamic experience. One of the most notable improvements in Dragon's Dogma 2 is the enhancement of the AI for pawns. The updated AI allows pawns to make more precise decisions in battle, enhancing their effectiveness in combat overall. And I've noticed that in many of the gameplay demos, pawns are much more active in combat and seemingly don't get lost in the fight as much as they used to. Furthermore, pawns are also going to have more variety in their dialogue. No more wolves hunt in packs arisen, or at least not so often. And something that I've also seen is that many that have had access to the demo draw comparisons to Baldur's Gate 3, with how party members will sometimes have chats in the background while you're walking around. VGC explored this further in their interview, asking, "The pawns in this game are noticeably more talkative than before. Can you elaborate on how you've expanded their functions in Dragon's Dogma 2? Itsuno responded by saying, "One of the things a lot of players said about the original game was that they often heard the same thing from their pawns. This is a bit of a technical limitation at the time in how much we were able to include for pawn dialogue. I do like the idea of pawns that are talking to the Arisen and each other quite a lot. For me, it added a sense of being accompanied by a party of adventurers, and that's kind of essential to what makes Dragon's Dogma unique. So I don't just want to turn down the frequency and have them shut up all the time because it wouldn't feel the same. What we tried to do this time is increase the variance in the different kind of things you'll hear them say. Of course, in a game, it's impossible to never hear the same thing twice, but ideally, you will hear much less the same thing repeatedly. They will also react to more triggers than just what you're doing. They will react to the scenery they see in the world and each other. They'll talk amongst themselves about treasure chests that you might have missed nearby, and that kind of thing. I think compared to the original game, it should be more fun listening to the pawns talk constantly, simply because they have a lot more different things to say, but you'll want to hear. I am a huge fan of the pawn system. I think it is one of the coolest mechanic systems, whatever you want to call it, that I've seen in an RPG. And while it's not perfectly implemented in Dragon's Dogma 1, it was still really cool to interact with, and it's going to be really cool to see it fully realized, at least hopefully fully realized, in Dragon's Dogma 2. I'm sure there's still going to be some rough ends. We're still probably going to hear some repetitive stuff, which is fine because we have to have some stuff to meme on in the first place. But I recently watched a reaction video from Asmongold where he was watching the IGN gameplay that was posted for Dragon's Dogma 2, and he talked about how the game does a really good job at capturing that essence of the Fellowship of the Ring. And I think that that is so true. I think Elden Ring did a really good job at the one person versus the world, but Dragon's Dogma 2 really captures that classic fantasy setting that really inspires a lot of us to play this kind of genre of game to begin with. And I think that that's really special. And that they're leaning further into that and trying to perfect it even further just makes it that much more interesting. And also further on in this interview and in other interviews that they've had as well, they've talked about how many of the pawns are also just going to be spread throughout the world. So while you won't have the exact same party throughout the entire game, you will still see some of those characters throughout the world. And it's going to be really interesting to see some of them level as you level, because those players are still playing the game when you're playing. I think that's really cool. Now, outside of the improvements to existing mechanics, we're seeing the addition of things that we didn't see in the original Dragon's Dogma. The Talos, for example, a massive mechanical warrior, was shown off during the last showcase, which kind of reminds me of the Zora Magdaros fight in Monster Hunter World. While we did have fights that had ballistae, cannons, and other such things in Dragon's Dogma, I'm wondering if this fight will be the only fight like it, or whether there will be more set-piece boss fights like this in the future. We've also seen some changes to the vocation system and the addition of some new classes. The Trickster is an Arisen-only vocation that can conjure illusions, manipulate enemies, and support players' pawns, adding a new layer of strategy to the gameplay. This vocation joins other confirmed classes like the Fighter, Archer, Thief, Mage, Magic Archer, and Mystic Spearhand, providing a diverse range of options for us to explore with more potential classes maybe not revealed just yet. Combat also seems to be a lot more fluid in Dragon's Dogma 2, with characters chaining together light and heavy attacks, characters executing finishing moves when enemies reach low health, and we've also seen that we have the ability to use the environment to our advantage. As an example, climbing up to a great height and then diving on top of an enemy will do bonus damage. Now, you can attack me in the comments if you want, but from my perspective, I don't think that gameplay demos or trailers do Dragon's Dogma 2 any justice, because I think for the onlooker, they're going to see the combat and say, well, this is relatively janky looking, a little bit slow, without realizing that once they get their hands on it, this is one of the best combat systems in all of ARPGs. Now, with that said, looking at what they're focusing on, the moment-to-moment gameplay, which is what made Dragon's Dogma such an incredible game the first time around, seeing that as their main area of focus gives me a lot of optimism going into Dragon's Dogma 2. Seeing that we're going to have the ability to chain heavy and light attacks together, or light and heavy attacks together, being able to use our environment a little bit more dynamically, jumping off of things to be able to do even more damage, using the environment to blow a hole in a wall and wash something away to knock it out, making the pawns better and more active in combat. This is going to be so good. Dragon's Dogma 2 will also see major technological advancements throughout the entire game, and this is something that we're already seeing evident in the game's character creation system. This updated character creator is going to allow us to create these photorealistic player-created avatars, significantly enhancing the visual aspects of the game, but this is something that we also saw that was in Dragon's Dogma as well. Not the photorealistic side, but a really detailed character creator where people made some of the most beautiful pawns that you've ever seen in your entire life. In the VGC interview, Itsuno was also asked about the technological advancements of the game and how that would affect exploration. Specifically, Itsuno was asked about how seamless the world would be, and he responded by saying, speaking to the seamlessness of the world, there are no loading screens when you're exploring. Of course, if there's a cutscene, we might load it in and then you would load back to free exploration, but in terms of going into dungeons or caves or exploring different parts of the world, you'll never see a loading screen. The roads in the game are somewhat there to give players an idea of where they might need to go, but they are suggestions. In terms of game mechanics, they don't really mean anything other than the fact that we know people tend to follow roads when they're given them. So that helps us design a game without players getting lost too much. Also, the AI of pawns and other characters know where the roads are and will treat them as a guideline of where they might want to go. But other than that, you're pretty free to make your own way through the world. You can stick to the path if you want to. If you want, you can go off-piste and find your own way forward, free to do that as well. You, however, can't climb up flat rock, but you can clamber up areas that are about your character's height. Expanding on Itsuno's vision of creating a living, dynamic world in Dragon's Dogma 2, the game goes far beyond just removing loading screens to foster a seamless experience. This immersive world is populated by NPCs and pawns that follow their own unique schedules, contributing to the realism of the game's environment. But these schedules are not just cosmetic, they're dynamic and can be easily interrupted by an unexpected monster attack, adding a layer of unpredictability and interconnectivity to the world. Moreover, as players, we are not immune to these unscripted encounters. While utilizing ox carts for fast travel or setting up camp, our journeys can be cut short by random monster attacks as well. This element of surprise not only enhances the game's realism, but also keeps us constantly engaged and on our toes, as every journey is not guaranteed to be safe. I'm always reminded of this quote from Gabe Newell where he's talking about how realism in games doesn't necessarily make realism fun, but also that games need to react to the player regardless of whatever the player does. I think a really good example of this is looking at a game like Starfield, where if you try to take out any of the essential NPCs, you can't. They just stay alive no matter what you do. But seeing Dragon's Dogma 2 take this to the next logical step, which is not only making the game respond to what you do in the world, but also see the game respond to itself, is a completely different level. And it is so cool to see, because you can have these things happen where you have this small little peaceful village and there's an old lady going to get a bucket of water, and then all of a sudden, boom, an ogre attacks. And you seeing that and thinking to yourself that that could happen regardless if you were there or not is really cool. And it makes that game and that moment that much more immersive. That emergent gameplay where things can just happen out of nowhere is what players really crave. We want that moment-to-moment excitement. We want the game to keep us on our toes. I don't want to know where every single monster is going to be every single time. Sometimes I want to go looking for it. Sometimes I don't even want to find it. Sometimes I want to find something completely different that takes me off course and sends me off in a completely different direction doing something completely different. That's what makes games fun, especially open world games like this. Dragon's Dogma 2 is poised to be more than just a sequel. It's potentially a genre-defining experience sporting hundreds of hours of gameplay and a very long lifespan once the game is released. Building upon the innovative foundations of its predecessor, this game promises to bring groundbreaking improvements and features that could become a new standard in the ARPG genre. If this game delivers on what it promises, Dragon's Dogma 2 stands a strong chance of being a frontrunner for one of the best games of 2024, if not the best game of 2024. And as we approach its launch and more details are expected to be revealed, who knows what more we're going to learn about this game and what other things that they're going to include and just how big it's going to be. I've said this in previous videos in the past about Dragon's Dogma. I should say previous videos. There's one video that I made about Dragon's Dogma, but it was only 40 or 50% of what they actually had planned to make Dragon's Dogma in the first place. There was a whole other continent. We were supposed to go to the moon to go to a mega dungeon and fight a final boss. There was all these different things that they wanted to put in the game, but they couldn't. Whether that was time, whether that was budget, whether it was technology, it was probably a mix of just about everything. But now we're going to see the full and ultimate realization of that vision. At least that's what we're hoping to see. And with all of the improvements that they've made, all the things that they're leaning into, I can't tell you how excited I am for this game. And I think that you should be too. And if you're not, well, then I'm going to just make more videos trying to convince you to be excited for it. And then hopefully it turns out to be an incredible game. Otherwise, I'm going to get flamed for years for it. But that's just fine by me because I like being excited about games. Now, they might not all come out and meet my expectations, but I do enjoy the run-up because the run-up to the release is some of the best times and the best experiences that we have when games are coming out. Now, that doesn't mean I'm pre-ordering it, and that doesn't mean that you need to pre-order it either. We need to wait for reviews and for other things like that to make smart purchasing decisions, but it's okay for us to be excited about something and excited about the future of a genre that I love dearly. So I'm really interested to hear your guys' thoughts on Dragon's Dogma 2. Are you excited for this game? What other games are you looking forward to in 2024? There's actually quite a lot on the plate. So yeah, it's going to be great. But that's all I got for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, join the Discord, come to the podcast on Sunday, every Sunday, 2:30 p.m. PST. Come watch my streams. I stream multiple times a week. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.